Today is the healthy episode of the Simply Smarter webinar, and we're joined by two utterly fantastic and talented and knowledgeable folks from the Data Central team. I'll probably do a more formal introduction in just a moment, but Jared, I would like you to contrast where you live with where Marie lives.
So I think there's similarities because I'm about an hour north of Chicago. I almost wonder if Wisconsin's closer, but I don't know. I don't know this area too well. I grew up on the south side of the city, so like I know like the name of two streets over here, even though I've been here for like 2 years. But there's restaurants. I got Chipotle, Sweet Green, Target, Home Depot. So it feels still pretty normal.
All right, good deal. Well, why don't we have like so much stuff to go through, and I think I'm probably habitually the worst offender of going over on time, so we're going to try our best not to have that happen today. So why don't we just start jumping into things? Today is the healthy episode, and we're joined by Jared and Marie. Jared is a key member of our content team that puts together all these wonderful reports that you find in Report Pro. And he's going to go over with us some of the stuff that we've learned from our big healthy keynote report, which he authored and is just chock full of insight. And Marie has been with us for a long time. She's done a number of speaking events all around the country, extremely knowledgeable around food. And one of the other really great benefits is she's a registered dietitian as well, and brings some real nutrition expertise that we wanted to have highlighted in today's webinar. So my name is Jack, and today's a special day, right? Today is International Pie Day, and no one will know the answer to this. I was going to ask, like, hey, who knows who this person is? No one's going to know. This guy's name is Akira Haraguchi. He is renowned for having recited the most number of digits of pi, as far as we know. Any guesses as to how many digits of pi this guy can recite from memory?
Oh man.
1800.
To put in perspective, when I was in like grade school or something, I think I remembered like 50 digits of pi, and I was all proud of myself. How many do you think this guy remembers?
Someone else guessed 1800. Yes.
I think it's 117,000.
What? Wow.
So let us never underestimate the power of the human mind and what could actually be accomplished. 117,000. If you look at the record, he started reciting it on one day and like finish it like 6 p.m. the next day, just straight from memory. Wow. Absolutely incredible. So everybody go out and have a slice of pie and remember 5 digits, and you'll be still really far from this dude. Anyways, let's get the chat going, everybody. So when you do chat, make sure you select everyone when you hit chat so that everyone can see what you're talking about, and you're not just sending stuff to Jared, Marie, and myself. And maybe like we're never ones to steer away from controversy, so let's maybe start with a little more of a controversial topic. In your opinion, and this doesn't have to be scientific, this just be your personal opinion, will Ozempic, all the GLP-1s and semaglutides and all those sort of similar type drugs ultimately have a positive or negative effect on people's health? Marie, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, and I think it looks like most folks in chat would agree. I personally feel more negative about it, and I would say my main reason for that is I never think or feel like there's a magic bullet to accomplish anything for us when it comes to health. And I think that's really what Ozempic is attempting to be. So I would lean more toward negative. How about you, Jack?
I sort of think so. I think if used correctly and in a targeted way for certain population, certain portion of the population, like, yes, it could be great. But that's probably not how it's going to be used in the vast majority of cases. And if you look at the studies, let's say someone loses X number of pounds by taking a GLP-1, like about half of that weight that's lost comes from muscle mass. And it is way harder to put that stuff back on, which you really need, than it is to have lost that initial weight in the first place. You're probably putting yourself in a worse position. And also, there's like a horrible rebound effect. The people that go on it and then go off it typically go right back to where they were, if not worse. So it might be something you're taking for life. But for the select few that are using this as a targeted therapy to jumpstart maybe a healthier lifestyle, then that could be good. But as history has shown, that's probably not how most people are going to end up using this stuff. So hopefully we'll see it used responsibly, but I have my doubts that that's going to be what happens. Okay. Everybody, we have lots of great new content in Report Pro. I think most, probably most of your companies, if not the large majority of your companies, currently subscribe to our Report Pro service. There's thousands of reports in there with new reports being published every single week. We want to highlight a couple that are available right now that you could go in and look at and download today. Our 2024 industry forecast is fantastic. You'll find it there right now. Social media sensations, we published this just a little bit ago. We'll see where TikTok plays out in this the next time we update this report, given everything that's happening in Congress right now. Spring trends, what is happening as we enter the spring? So I'm down here in Florida, and all the talk is about the craziness of spring break. I don't know if that gets captured in this report, but all the food-related stuff gets captured. Make sure to check that out. And, there's just so much stuff in Report Pro. We invite you always go in, look around, root around, and then there's just thousands of reports. And again, there's brand new content virtually every single day. But today we're going to focus on a particular report in Report Pro, which is our healthy keynote, which Jared is the lead author of. So we're going to go over some healthy stats. Marie's going to sprinkle in some observations from around the world as it relates to health trends and things that she's been seeing as well. And I'll probably pepper in a couple of things too as we go. So with that, again, I apologize for speaking so quickly, but we have a lot of stuff to cover. Maybe Jared, you could sort of lead us into this. We have this conversation about the notion of well-being. Can you tell us what this sort of means to consumers?
Sure. So, trying to define the words health, well-being, it's like I can only think of that term that we love to use, nebulous. There's so many different aspects and angles to approach it. And I think this slide, demonstrates that very well. Here we ask consumers, amongst all of these, how important do you think these things are in terms of creating a sense of health, well-being? And they all are, in some sense, but we see, and we've trended this with our previous reports, but at the top, physical, emotional, mental health, finances, family relationships, they've all kind of more or less been constant in terms of their importance to most people. But we do see some shifts too. So, in the last, several years, work, career, spirituality, cultural identity, these things have become a little less important to some consumers.
Yeah, it is a nexus of all these things. And we also see that there's some things that are becoming more important versus less important when you just straight up ask people, what do they tell us?
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting, especially, I think I just authoring the previous healthy keynote, the emotional and mental health has just become more and more important to consumers, and we'll, see more of that today.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that. Is this career that I see over here where 18% say it's become less important, right? That sort of jumps out to me as well. If you look at a lot of these other ones, like generally people are always going to say, oh, things are more important to me now than they were before, because they don't really have that exact like apples to apples perspective. People tend to talk about things over time as though they were fixed in a time and making a decision right then and there, which is why you always see more important sort of outpacing less important, these types of questions. So we sort of look for instead are, when is the green bar bigger or smaller? And when is that, pink bar, bigger or smaller? And careers compared to everything else seems like it's become de-emphasized for a lot of people. But the stuff at the top holds very, very strong physical and mental health primarily. Well, what do we hear about this, Jared?
And, I think especially contrasting this with the previous healthy keynote, the mental and emotional aspect is just all the insights are very vivid in this one. We see, more than a third of people say they're anxious or depressed. And then, 6 in 10 say that, emotional and mental health have become more important. But I think, one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that mental, emotional, physical, they're all interrelated. They're trifecta. So, I don't know, that is kind of how I would define the health in that sense.
Would you characterize this as sort of like a positive set of numbers, a negative set of numbers? Like, what was your reaction when you saw these from the report?
I would say negative. And we'll see on the next few slides like a deeper dive into this, but I actually like kept rechecking the data just to make sure it was right. It alarmed me a little bit.
Yeah. Look at this.
Yeah, this is crazy. And like I've already said, 30 people anxious or depressed. Myriad of physical afflictions here. Right off the bat, we see that 3/4 of people have had some type of health condition in the last 5 years, but gets even scarier when you break it out by generation.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. And I maybe just want to call something out. So here we ask people, what have you experienced, like from that respondent's perspective? And here's what they told us. In actuality, they're probably like, this is probably undercounting a number of things, right? So I would just look at like overweight as a key number here. 26% of consumers, when asked, say that they think they're overweight or have been overweight in the past few years. Like that's a pretty sharp contrast from the actual US number of about 70%. So people might be underrepresenting some of the things they've actually experienced. In some cases, the margins or the gaps might be larger or smaller, but in actuality, these numbers are probably substantially higher in a number of categories. Maybe not for something like cancer, but for overweight, anxiety, depression, some of those things might be higher in real life. And you can actually see the numbers if you look into some of the medical studies. But you're right. You split this out by generation. What do we see?
Half of all young people are anxious or depressed. I mean, that caught my attention right away. I mean, it was a little scary to see that, but and I can understand it. But like I think like it's not a surprise that physical conditions peak up as you age, but just a lot of like alarm bells ringing when I don't know, looking at this.
Yeah, and there's a question in chat, Jared. Who was included in this poll?
So it's Gen Pop, all consumers, 3,000 respondents.
Yeah, so we got pretty much everything. There should be not much bias in the types of people, and we have a pretty large sample as well. That is a crazy number, and that Gen Z number, and to some extent the millennial number too, but half of Gen Z already having anxiety and depression is gnarly. Like that is just crazy. Do you have any theories as to maybe what's driving that?
Yeah, I think that just as humans, we haven't evolved, our brains haven't evolved to receive so many inputs. So things like social media and whatnot are just absolutely destructive to us. And it makes me wonder what the future is going to be like just from that angle alone. But I would say that, social media, and, I think social media in particular is bad from a few different angles. Just one, in terms of attention span, just getting bombarded by all that input, but two, just creating unrealistic expectations of what life should be like.
I think you're bang on right. There's a number of psychologists and sociologists that have done quite a bit of work in this area, and social media seems to be the number one thing. I don't know if any of you have followed like the work of Jonathan Haidt, for example. He's done a ton of work in this area. And you create this like very impossible to achieve fake perception of what your life should be like, that then all these kids sort of like look on TikTok and they sort of aspire to, but it's all fake, right? Like people will actually go and rent by the hour the ability to sit in a fake private plane. So they take pictures and videos and post them on TikTok, and then everyone else thinks it's real, and they're like, why don't I have that? It's largely a bunch of BS that we're holding ourselves to as a standard, and it's making people very, very depressed. There's other factors too, and I think chat listed a number of good ones, but that is a pretty alarming thing. But there are things people also doing to try to get a little bit healthier, maybe relax their mind. I'd not heard of this, Marie. Do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, so seeing earlier health for people today straddles a few different worlds, physical and mental and emotional health, and this really touches on all of them. So the concept is called forest bathing, or it comes to us from Japan, where it's called Shinrin Yoku, and it's the idea of essentially getting out in nature and spending time in nature, being healed by nature. Science backs this. So there's compounds that are released from trees when you're out in nature that they say increase our count of white blood cells and improve our immunity. So the thought is think of this, the getting out in nature every day, going into the forest, as similar to our daily allotment of fruits and vegetables. It's something we got to do every day. It helps us with our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, and importantly, to our conversation we were just having, it's like, leave your device at home when you do this. Don't take your phone or your fitness tracker, and really just immerse yourself in nature and be very present in that way.
Oh, so that's what I didn't get. I'm like, isn't this just hiking? Like, I don't get it. But it's hiking without the devices or other things that are, occupying your mind, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of
Um,
like, don't have a path either. Like maybe swerve into the woods and maybe count the rings on a tree trunk or something like that. Really be present and without a path necessarily, just kind of see where you end up. And I mentioned earlier, I live in the Pacific Northwest, and there's many more guided groups for forest bathing outings happening out here, but it's also something you can, of course, really easily do on your own. Just head into the woods or into nature in some way.
What's funny, I just turned on Netflix yesterday, and the #2 movie was something called Alone, about a woman that got abducted and was chased through the woods by like the psychotic person. I'm like, oh, she's forest bathing right now. She's just wandering through the woods because she had no devices either. I've shown this chart a few times. Normally it's a guessing game, but I think you all know what it is. This is human life expectancy at birth in the US. And you can see we sort of broke this out into 20-year chunks. Like through all of the past 120 years, almost, we've had big increases in life expectancy, but it's slowed down recently. And in the past few years, life expectancy is actually down. And this actually predates COVID a little bit too. So something has happened where we're not making gains in human life as much anymore. So we sort of said, you know what could be causing this? Like, we're in no position ourselves to just sort of come up with an answer. So why don't we just ask ChatGPT instead? So we said, hey, list the top 10 things that we think have slowed down the gains in human life expectancy in the US, put them in ranked order, and give them a score from 0 to 10 in terms of how strong of a factor you think each one of these things is. Opioid epidemic is right up there at the top. Fentanyl is probably on the new list now. But right up there in that second spot is the unhealthy American diet. And you can see rising obesity rates there too. I think we want to maybe focus on that a little bit, because that's something that, look, who doesn't want to live longer? Who wants to die prematurely? Pretty much nobody. This is something that our industry in particular can actually help target and help make better. There aren't many industries that could claim to do that, to do something that's actually going to extend human life. But we're an industry that we can actually make a difference in this case. And people want this difference. You ask every year, what's your New Year's resolution? It's the same 3 things at the top: eat better, exercise more, improve your finances, right? These are eternal unmet consumer needs. And the eat better piece of it, to me, that's like a giant piece of white space. That's something that people want to do. They've always wanted to do. They just need more help doing it, whether it's information or other healthier products. And we want to make a little bit of a case today that there's a huge capitalistic opportunity, profit-making opportunity to bring healthier things to market that consumers will go for. And we'll talk about what some of those might be, but more broadly, just that there is this underlying demand. So Jared, tell us about this. What are people looking for in a healthy lifestyle?
So here we ask consumers, pick 2 of these. Which 2 things here do you think are most important to creating a healthy lifestyle? And we see, the top are all very physically orientated, but eating right definitely is the most impactful thing we can do for our health. And it's right up, like, it's interesting to see exercise right up there, but I think just, super relevant for all of us. And just going back to what you were saying about like the opportunity in the industry, it is that eating right element that's most crucial.
Yeah. I mean, you ask people like, hey, think of all the things you could do to be healthy. Eating is #1. Like, that's us. That's us, guys. We could do something about that. And you think about the market size of that opportunity. If you want to take a pure capitalistic approach to this, it's tremendous. And it's this is a big gap there that I think we can all fill in some way and make a little money in the process, and do some good. So
Yeah,
what do consumers say, Jared?
and I think, like, even adding more credence to all of that, 6 in 10 consumers say outright recognize that they need to eat healthier. And I think that opens up an interesting conversation though, where it's like, what is healthy food? Because consumers recognize that, something that's healthy for one person might not be for another person. So I think that, is not only intriguing, but perhaps poses somewhat of a challenge too.
Yeah, I think the thing that's surprising to me is that 70% number is not actually 100%, because that claim, I think, is basically objectively true, right? Some things that are good for some people may not be the best for other people. Years ago at one of our events, we featured on stage a couple of companies that do essentially DNA testing and brings that back to an understanding of what you personally should be looking for in your food based on your genes. I just recently signed up for a service myself that does a more detailed DNA test than you would get from like a 23andMe. It's called Intellex DNA. That's going to help me figure out what I should be eating, what supplements I should take, and all this other stuff based on my own specific DNA, because we're all a little bit different in that regard. Well, how about concerns, Jared? What are people worried about?
Fascinating. So, we ask consumers amongst all of these, what concerns you when it comes to eating healthy? And, I don't think it's a big surprise to see high costs at the top of the list here, especially now. But what stuck out most to me was just how high artificial ingredients is on the list. It's basically on par with high prices. And that's fascinating to me because, healthy food just in general has a price premium associated with it. But that element of artificial ingredients right up there in terms of concerns. And, that makes me think too, it's like, are artificial ingredients inherently bad? So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a point, Jared, that's actually, there's a chat going on right now, which is great, which is, is it that we need more information, or the consumers need more information, or is it just a pure, personal responsibility thing? There has been information out there, I think, and to your point where you're saying, oh, I don't really know, is this good or bad? Maybe it's not extensive enough, or maybe it's not the right information. But there's certainly confusion in the marketplace. I mean, we'll talk about some examples in a few slides, but just think, like, there are many things in the past where, like, is this good for me? Oh, now it's bad for me. Now that thing is good for me again. Is chocolate good for me? Oh, it's bad for me. Oh, it's good for me. It becomes very, very confusing for people. And when something becomes confusing over and over again, you just sort of stop paying attention to it after a while. So hopefully we get to a better quality of information. Maybe it's even personalized at some point. So I think the egg is a perfect example. We've talked about this in the past, but I can show you some numbers to go along with it to give us a little perspective. There's been, tons of debate and seemingly consensus at a specific point in time that then changes to the entire opposite consensus at a later point in time. Eggs were good for you, then they're bad for you, then they're good for you again, then they're bad for you. And it's super confusing for consumers. Look, this is me speaking as a private citizen. I personally think eggs are great for you because they have choline, which maybe can help stave off dementia and Alzheimer's, especially if you're an ApoE4 carrier. But, and I think we've learned that unless you're a hyperabsorber of cholesterol, which is only a small percentage of the population, dietary cholesterol doesn't tend to get absorbed and shouldn't be that big of a concern. And eggs have so many nutritious things in them that they're probably great for you, at a certain level. But we could see what consumers think too. And we asked them a question in the Healthy study. Various foods, we'll use eggs as an example. 16% of consumers say they plan to increase their egg consumption. 5% say they plan to decrease their egg consumption. So you get to like a net of 11%, right? Plus 11. And we could look at that same number, that net increase versus decrease ratio, or I guess not a ratio, increase minus decrease number for other things as well. And it looks sort of like this. We sort of color coded them. I would say the stuff in blue are things that people are generally looking to increase a little bit. The stuff in gray, they're probably a little bit more neutral on. The one item in red is the place that's a little bit, maybe want to cut back on, but this is consumer perception. And then you have the stuff in green, which is like so green ahead of anything else that it's like, we really should bring more of this fruits and vegetables into product. There's big demand. Now it's probably hard to do it at scale in a lot of cases, but it seems like it's a problem worth solving because there is real demand for that. And if you want to see a little bit more detail, check out that. How many pages is that healthy keynote report, Jared?
Ooh, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think like 100 something.
Yeah,
Around,
there's
around 100.
tons and tons of detail. Okay, what do we see here?
So here we ask consumers, which of the following attributes do you think are important when it comes to defining a food as healthy? And, you know, well, okay, so the top 5 here, they're all about the absence of something, which you mentioned yesterday, which is tremendously fascinating. But I also think what's something that's interesting too for me is just how high all natural is, because it's like, there's no rules on how to find that. It's natural if it comes from the earth. So, seeing that higher than organic or non-GMO, which requires certification, is fascinating to me. And all natural is always, like, when we ask these types of questions, at the top of the list. But I think that, even just going back to the concerns of artificial ingredients, I think that consumers don't want to see that. I think that if they do see those elements, they don't assume what they're eating is healthy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, look, there's probably a small segment of the population that cares about these very specific individual health claims or, absence of bad things claims. There's a much larger segment of the population that just wants to have a reassurance that their food is generally, going to be good for them. So they like to see some of these things. But then you also have another piece of the population that still wants to know their food is generally good for them, but maybe has lost, belief in some of these claims. Like, to your point, all natural. I think it probably meant something different to consumers back in like 2003. Then all of a sudden, every product has an all natural stamp on it. And people are like, oh, okay, maybe this doesn't mean that much anymore. So it is constantly evolving. And the question is, do you want to appeal to sort of like that shortcut minded consumer that just wants like an immediate, like, oh, this is probably pretty good for me? Or that smaller, very specific population of consumers that is looking for organic for a very particular reason, or looking for gluten-free for a very particular reason. There's a flip side though, right? There's some stuff that people don't want.
Yeah, this one's very interesting. We asked for this one, which of these do you actively, limit your consumption of or avoid altogether? And, a lot of artificial ones on here, like high fructose corn syrup and trans fats and, those sorts of things. But I was really surprised to see just how high sugar is. Just under half of all people avoid sugar. I don't know. That was fascinating to me.
Yeah, that looks like that's the new target for a lot of people in terms of things to reduce. We started seeing this in the past few years, and I think that number is probably still going to continue to increase in the periods ahead. You're seeing a lot more, health studies about the impact of sugar and how it might lead to insulin resistance, and how insulin resistance is like the core driver of so much of metabolic disease and shortening of life and whatnot. That's probably going to be up there, number one for a while, and maybe even continuing to grow. But we talked about gluten. Marie, I think you looked in our Snap tool and you saw that gluten-free is growing like crazy on US restaurant menus, at least.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's found on over 43% of overall restaurants in the US today. And as we just saw in those previous slides, more and more people are seeking to avoid it all the time. More people are sort of adopting interest or practice in gluten-free. And to give some context about how high of prevalence this is, just last year, gluten-free surpassed penetration of vegetarian on menus. So if we think of like how long there's been vegetarian options, how commonplace that is, today there's more mentions of gluten-free on restaurant menus than there are for vegetarian options. So definitely something that continues to grow, and consumer interest is definitely peaking in this area.
Yeah, and obviously, like, we know the demand for gluten-free items goes way beyond like people with celiacs, for instance. I think part of it's like health halo. as well. I think, are we also seeing maybe like a growing population of folks that are concerned about like pesticides and glyphosate and whatnot, and they tie that to, you know, gluten-based products?
Yeah, that's a big one with gluten. Yep.
This was interesting. You found this place too. What is this?
Yeah, this is a restaurant I'd love to try. For those of you who are joining us from San Francisco, I think Hollywood has a location of this, and Denver has one now. So it's a restaurant called Catawba. It's a fast casual operator, and they call themselves a clean casual restaurant, which they define as saying they really focus on ingredient quality. They source locally. They have heavy use of vegetables, clean proteins. You can see there on the left, they do lead with what they're avoiding, and it's quite a lengthy list. No feedlot animals, no refined sugar, white sugar, no dairy. I personally find it especially interesting that this is the first restaurant I've noticed that makes that statement about seed oils. They do not use seed oils in their operation. It's first I've seen. I don't know, Jared or Jack, if you've seen others who are stating that in the food service space. But this Catawba operator, they're up to 5 locations now, so they are growing.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm glad you included the picture, because when I read the no whatever list on the left, I'm like, wait, what can they possibly serve at this point? There's nothing left, but the food looks delicious. And
Yeah.
I'm Jared, I don't know if you've seen different, but this, I've not seen a place that calls out no seed oils before either. But that seems to be I don't know, Jared, if you have.
No, I haven't. And but I do love seeing the absence of allergens on here, like dairy and peanuts. And I'm seeing more of that quite a bit.
Yeah. You know, I think there's a question in chat, is seed oil going to be the next big thing? It's certainly being talked about a lot more in health, fitness, like nutrition circles. And there's a little bit of a debate around seed oils. You know, some say it causes oxidative stress. For instance, others say it's fine. I mean, we showed this before, but just to show you why things are maybe confusing for consumers, on the left-hand side, you have a Harvard study that says, no, seed oil is totally fine. It's wonderful. And on the other hand, you have a study from another university saying, you know, seed oils can lead to an unhealthy gut and other issues as well. So it's really hard for people to know exactly what to believe. But again, it might be personal to that person too. But in my sort of personal experience, I'm seeing a lot more conversation around seed oil on social media than before. So I'm seeing some comments in chat, which is a really nice segue into this thing on Netflix. Marie, tell us about this.
Yeah, I'll do my best. In full transparency, I'll admit I have not watched this documentary, but I have seen a lot of feedback about it from nutrition professionals, from medical professionals, from friends, colleagues. A lot of people have watched this. It's if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's a study where they analyze food intake and nutrition and what happens to our bodies when eating a certain way using twins. So one twin will eat one way, a vegan diet, and one twin eats an omnivorous diet. And I will say most of the feedback I've seen is quite critical. I think another thing is that we saw earlier that most consumers today believe that, you know, any one diet isn't best for everyone. 70% of people, maybe more, believe that. And this program is really advocating for a vegan diet. It's really been stated to be biased in that way. And I think if we go to the next slide, there's one example of a Peter Attia who said there were tons of flaws in the study. The twins didn't eat a similar macronutrient composition. I think another thing that maybe is not broadly known among consumers is when you rely on a dietary recall study in any capacity, that's not always the most accurate. It's thought to be a pretty flawed method, because if you think about it, I think it's hard for all of us to remember what we ate yesterday. So a number of things, a number of criticisms have come toward this. I don't know, Jack or Jared, did you watch this program?
Yeah, I could maybe rant about it a little bit. And look, I think we as putting on a consumer hat for a moment, we get presented with a lot of stuff that looks scientific, but maybe is not. There's probably some shred of stuff in there that's absolutely true, but you can, Dr. Peter Tia seems to be pretty well respected. He's like, this thing fails Science 101, that particular documentary. I will, this is like one little trick I use in my life. Like any documentary that has a message, meaning it's not a true crime story or a tour of the national parks, or something like that, is probably propaganda to some extent. And I think you want to look at things with that propaganda filter on. And I think we've sadly, in my opinion, I think we've seen this in a lot of health and nutrition research too, where it seems like the people that continue to publish study after study after study on similar topics always have the same conclusion. And it's as though some of those studies are more narrative driven than they are driven by a search for actual truth. Look, it's probably great for some people to go, because that advocated for a plant-based diet in the end. And we honestly don't know, is a full plant-based diet or a very heavy plant-based diet much better than an omnivorous diet or even a carnivorous diet in some cases. I think I saw a message in chat where someone said he's upped his intake of red meat and feels better than he ever has. That might be right for some people. I don't think we can make sweeping generalizations, which is why doing things like knowing yourself and getting your DNA checked out probably become pretty important. Jared, any thoughts?
I totally agree. I eat primarily vegan for the last several years. Actually, I eat entirely vegan. And, I noticed for the last several years, my hands during the winter months are just dried, they're bleeding, they're cracked. I took my daughter's fish oil supplements just randomly, and within a day, like my hands were fine. And it just blew my mind. And it's like, wow, I actually should get one of those DNA kits.
It's cool. Data's cool, right? And you get a lot of data back with one of those genomics tests. So here's a question. Many of you might watch someone or multiple people on YouTube, TikTok, if you're willing to admit that, Instagram, or some other sort of like doctor or health person or nutritionist or some other influencer around like food, diet, exercise, lifestyle. I'm curious to know, because I'm looking for more people to follow too. Who do you watch? Who are some of those folks out there? I'm seeing some Huberman. I saw Mark Hyman on there. I saw Ken Berry on there as well. Keep that list going, and hopefully this is inspiration for all of us to maybe Guy Fieri. That's funny. Hopefully this is a good inspiration for all of us to find some other people that we can maybe look at too as well. And again, I wouldn't believe every single word out of every single person's mouth, but more information is better. Okay, let's keep that list going, guys. Jared, what do we have here?
Okay, so we asked consumers on here, which of these following diets are you currently practicing? So these are current practitioners. And, I think the interesting thing here is, again, this is Gen Pop 3000 US consumers. There's a lot of people practicing these different individual diets. But, building off that, we look at some of these trendier diets, keto, paleo, FODMAP, these sorts of things. Not too, very small percentage of consumers are actually practicing these diets. And, I think that's important just in terms of like menu composition. So when you're going to design your menu, I think it's important, if you're catering to that healthy audience, to be able to, essentially be able to configure your offerings for that. But if you're just going to go that route, I don't know, there's not that many strict adherence to it.
Yeah, like you go to, like, let's say you're going to build a menu around the FODMAP diet. Like, good luck. You only get a small percentage of consumers, and eventually they're going to shift into their specific diet. So you really have to focus on themes, like bigger themes, I think. So I totally agree with you, Jared. And if you look at some of these themes, these are things that people say are sort of most important to them, right? Like, which of these things matters most to you? You can see feeling good is number one. Then you can see, looking good, long life, prevent disease. But what's interesting is when you start breaking this out by generation. So looks good as in terms of it being like the most important thing to you. Gen Z, like boomers, really could not care less about this at that point. That is not their health motivator. Whereas disease prevention, that is what boomers care about. So depending on who your audience is, if you're an operator, you could maybe think about what their core motivation is. Is it long life, prevent disease, look good? feel good. And oftentimes your customer base, in terms of which generations you tend to skew toward, are going to be informative to you about which one of those core foundations to target. We asked some questions too, Jared, about where people expect to find healthy options. What did we find?
I love this one. This was one of the most interesting ones from that, insights from the healthy keynote. We asked consumers, where do you expect to easily find healthy offerings? And it's so weird that, more than anywhere else, fine dining restaurants have that, healthy halo associated with them. And, I don't know what the takeaway is there. I think it's just intriguing because it's like, a lot of the population is just innately barred from dining at these places regularly. Their dishes, are indulgent, they're expensive. It's just like, why do we associate health with that?
Yeah, look, this might not happen anytime soon, but if you were to ask me, like in a perfect world, this chart would be inverted.
Mhm.
That QSR and fast casual and the places that people go every day, it'd be great if those are the ones that had the most healthy options. And fine dining, I go to fine dining place, I don't eat like the most delicious thing regardless of health, like the thing I couldn't get anywhere else. Like that, I'd be fine with that being like the least healthy of all of these places because you're not going there all the time. But maybe we have it a little bit backwards and we could start sort of redirecting that in the future. Okay, we have a wonderful report. It's our Data Central 500 report that covers the top 500 chains. And one of the things that this report covers, this is the version from last year, we're working on the current year's edition, we'll talk more about that in a second, is we actually look at unit growth among chain restaurants. And you could see there's a much longer list than this. We're just showing the ones that have the segments of the restaurant industry, the chain restaurant industry that have had the most unit growth. And the ones that have grown the most are these sort of health-focused chains. You could see there's real consumer demand for this. I'll go back to that earlier statement that we made, which is there's a huge money-making, profit, capital-driven, whatever opportunity to offer up healthier things to consumers. So don't even think about it in terms of doing the right thing. Think of it in terms of like, wow, there's a real market for this and it's expanding. So I would ask all of you, which health-focused chains, this is any multi-unit, so like even like a 2-unit chain, I would still call a chain. Which health-focused chains, 2 units, 3 units, 5 units, 10 units, 100 units, have you started noticing more recently? Let's see if we can get maybe a little list going here. We'll probably see a bunch of things that most of us haven't heard of before, which is the entire point. Let's inspire us to look at these a bit more. It's a lot of salad concepts, fresh kitchen, a lot of things with fresh, little beat. Here's the sit-down version of the restaurant. But they're popping up and they're expanding. Flower Child for a more vegetarian-centric menu. These are the things that are growing. And we're seeing not just, these concepts, but also things on their menu that are interesting and also things on menus of non-health focused chains that are healthy. So maybe, Marie, can you take us through the first Flower Child dish example we have here?
Yeah, so Flower Child, I think today they're at about 29 units across the country. I was looking in their social media and their Instagram to see what dishes they have. They specifically advertise as being healthy, and this is one. Their Mother Earth Bowl, you can see there's a ton of veggies in there, some avocado, ancient grains. It's interesting. It's like, what themes can you pull out of these dishes that are advertised and marketed to consumers as healthy? I think veg-centric is a really core component. I think also color. You can see like the green and the orange and the beautiful colors of this dish help signify to people or reflect that a dish is healthy, which is great. We want people to be eating the rainbow. But yeah, they're advertising specifically a number of bowls on their menu as falling under the realm of healthy options at Flower Child.
Yeah, isn't there that theory that colorful foods may be better to us because we were evolutionary adapted to spotting colorful things when we were hunting gathering?
Oh, that's interesting, like berries and
yeah, like our bodies sort of evolved toward that because they're easy to spot, and over the course of evolution, we sort of adapted to those foods, so they're optimized for us in a way. They have more phytochemicals and all that, but they say, like you said, eat the rainbow, right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, one of the best things we can do for our microbiome is eat a diversity of plants every day or every week. Try and eat 40 different plants throughout your week. Some of us are guilty. We go to the grocery store, we buy apples, potatoes,
Yep.
and lettuce or something every week. But if you can really focus on diversifying, try something new, grab watercress in your next visit, try and fit a lot of different vegetables and fruits and plant foods. That's really something that will be good for us when it comes to our gut health.
1,000,000%. Real quickly, let's talk about this Qdoba one.
Yeah, so Qdoba, much bigger chain, 700 plus units. This January, they released 5 new bowls advertised as post-workout bowls. So this is just one. This is their keto bowl, but they also had a macro bowl. They have a veggie bowl. These are all very, again, veg forward and also heavy protein. In fact, I think one of them was like double protein bowl. And that's something worth mentioning, I think, in this health conversation, is that protein is such a beloved macronutrient by consumers. It's like this magical word. If you mention it, it's going to be attractive to a lot of people. We all probably do eat enough protein, but we're all also always seeking to eat more protein. So a dish like this will help you accomplish that.
If we have time at the end, I'll rant with you on protein for a second, Marie.
Sounds good.
Dig in. What's this thing?
This is another one, so about a similar size as Flower Child. I think they have 29 units. I believe they're all in New York. This is a chain that, again, focuses on advertising healthy options. They really focus on vegetables. They also have a protein focus. You can see it here. They list out clearly in their social media, on their website, what the nutrient composition is of their meals. So this particular crispy chicken kale Caesar has 54 grams of protein. And again, they source local vegetables. They focus on using vegetables and ingredients that our grandmas could pronounce. So just a couple examples, in the market today that are advertised and positioned as healthy.
Yeah, and they call it the fiber content too, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, let's look beyond food for a second. We have so much to cover. Jared, what do we see here?
All right, and this is a very interesting one too. So I was very surprised to see this, but we asked consumers, which of these pharmaceuticals do you take medication for? And, 6 out of 10, more than 6 out of 10 consumers take some form of pharmaceutical. And, there's a lot of interesting generational skews. I think that, this harkens back to what we were seeing about anxiety and depression. More than a quarter of Gen Z, Millennial, and Gen X consumers are taking a mental well-being pharmaceutical drug. 2/3 of boomers are taking a physical well-being drug. Just, I don't know. I was pretty surprised to see this.
This is unbelievably depressing that so many people are depressed, especially younger people, right? Nearly 30% of Gen Zers being on anxiety meds or depression meds is crazy. And you have an explosion of SSRIs in high school. You have an explosion of Adderall usage in college. It is really, really, really nuts, and doesn't seem like it's getting better at all. We did a mental health episode of this webinar a few months ago, and we talked about the relationship between food and your mind, and or your gut-brain axis, for instance. It all really sort of does tie together. And I said before, hey, we could fix like the healthy eating thing as an industry. If we fix the healthy eating thing, I think we also fix some of the mental well-being stuff too. And it's something at least sort of endeavor toward. It's really crazy, the numbers we're seeing right now. Okay, just real quickly, Jared, what do we see here?
And, little less maybe innocuous, this one. So this is vitamin and supplement consumption of what consumers take. Interesting that 3/4 of consumers report taking some form of vitamin and supplements. But, essentially vitamins absolutely dominate this segment. What I'm interested in here is, the rates of nootropics and adaptogens, because I keep seeing the word adaptogen everywhere, but I also think about nootropics, which is something I got into, a few years ago, lion's mane supplements and, things such as that. Very, very cool. I like the effect from them. But, and just even going off on nootropics, I almost wonder if this is underreported too, because, things like caffeine, nicotines, those are nootropics in themselves.
Yeah, we had a question about NAD plus in the chat. I think we'll actually talk about that in a little bit. To your point around stuff people are taking now, we're seeing psilocybin, et cetera. I think, Marie, is this you that want to share a little bit here?
Yeah, and just quickly, you know, mainly what we saw about people are taking a lot of medications today for mental health care, and psilocybin shows a ton of promise in that realm too, that it could usher in a new era for how we treat mental health conditions. Lots of states are jumping on board. I think Washington was the latest to form a group at University of Washington to study psilocybin. So benefits for all ages, kind of exciting work happening here.
Yeah. And here's a couple of the products.
Yeah, and you know,
10 seconds.
non-hallucinogenic mushrooms also have a lot of benefits. So Jared, to your point, adaptogenic benefits, they boost our digestion, our mood, lots of different things. Chaga mushrooms, reishi mushrooms, lion's mane are probably many you'll hear about. These are gummies. So take one per day. You can see all the benefits listed there on the left. And I think in our next slide, we have
I don't know if I like this marketing because it makes it look like you have to dress like a hippie to take this product. It's limiting the market a little bit, but let's see the next one.
That's a good observation. This one is a mouth spray, I think a daily mouth spray, and they really advertise if you're a person who likes instant benefits, you'll feel it with this. Jared, I don't know when you were taking lion's mane if you felt you could feel it instantly. But
No, it took like a month afterwards, but then like I don't know. I mean, maybe it's placebo or something. Well, I don't want to say that, but I definitely noticed way more mental cognition benefits.
cool.
So this takes us into another topic, and we're getting towards the end. Longevity, which is a big bursting space. You've probably all seen anti-aging or longevity clinics start to sort of open up in your city. I guess if you're in a rural area, maybe not quite as much, but in big cities, they are popping up all over the place. It's unclear exactly what's science, what's good science and what's hocus pocus, but who here knows who this guy is? Anybody? This guy is insane. This is awesome. So he's gotten a lot of notoriety for basically saying he spends $2 million a year to optimize his health regimen. He takes tons of pills, eats the same 3 meals every day, has dinner at 11:30 in the morning, and is trying to age in reverse, basically. My personal take is, who knows if all this stuff is working, but he is publishing everything he does. And he calls himself the most measured human in history, where he's getting, weekly blood tests and all these machines that are measuring every part of his body. And he's publishing that information and what he has achieved, in his aging from the various things, the various interventions that he's doing. So part of me thinks, yeah, there's probably some craziness there. Part of me also thinks, like, hey, if some good comes of this and we learn something and he's sharing it with the world, who am I to criticize? So I actually think it's probably a positive thing, even if it seems a little bit crazy. So as it so happens, tomorrow I'm going to this thing like right up the street from me that just happens to be in town. It's this thing called the Live Long Summit. And I wanted to maybe share just like some of the types of things that are on that agenda to give you a sense of a few of the things that people are talking about in the longevity space. So here's just a few of the sessions. There's a bunch more. David Sinclair, I can't quite tell if he is a great scientist or if he's more of a snake oil salesperson. There's been some controversy about resveratrol and some other things that he's been advocating for in the past, but he has a session on whether we can reverse aging, unveiling the unseen, new ways to figure out what's inside your body. So this is, I actually did a full body MRI, a Pronuvo scan last year, which taught me a lot of interesting things about what's happening inside of me. If it's information, why not? And things like, can you slow down or stop dementia and Alzheimer's, for instance, plus probably 15 other topics, along these similar lines. I think there's a growing body of consumers that are getting into this stuff. And there's a growing number of therapies. Red light therapy has been shown to have a number of positive effects. Like, I was sort of shocked. I'm like, this has got to be a bunch of BS. This can't possibly be good. But you see a number of peer-reviewed studies that show specific effects from standing in front of infrared and near infrared light for 20, 30 minutes a day at the right wavelength. Cold therapy, Wim Hof has helped popularize this quite a bit. Some of you maybe do cold plunge, or maybe you jump into a cryotherapy machine. I really like this one that they have at Restore, which is sort of like a chain of, health clinics across the country. I'm not sure, but they have a really great enclosed cryo chamber, which is awesome. You get in there for 3 minutes, Typically, the temperatures go from negative 160 to negative 240 degrees, and you try to bring your body temperature down. Or sauna therapy. Finnish sauna has the most research on it, most published research showing real benefits towards for your health and longevity. There's a question whether infrared sauna achieves the exact same thing. My guess is it probably does, but I'm not a doctor, so don't trust what I say. This pug looks like he should not be in the sauna, though. He's probably going to overheat. But sauna therapy is thought to be great for you. And even like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, you're seeing more of these clinics have like a hyperbaric chamber that you could get. This one looks like a very expensive house where someone's managed to afford a hyperbaric machine in home. But they actually have ones you could buy for your house. They're still sort of expensive. They even have like stand-up models or sit-down models where you could sit in there, you could use your laptop, stand there for an hour. And these are actually used in hospital settings too for like wound healing and a number of other things. But the thought is that this has many benefits beyond just, sort of that acute care wound healing type of an application. So we're seeing more of all these types of things, and who knows which ones are going to be truly great in the long run. It is still emerging. So you see these places pop up too. This is Restore. There's, I think, a number of other places like this where people are getting IV injections now. I remember the first time I was at like a fancy hotel and they had like a spa, and on the spa menu, you could get an IV. I'm like, what the F? Like you could actually have someone stick a needle in your arm at the spa. Like you can get your nails done. You get a massage, and you actually have someone like jab you with a needle and like drip fluid into you. Like, yeah. And not just at spas, but at these clinics all around the country now. And these have become quite popular, whether it's for, just fluid replenishment, you got to get your fluids back up. Or, I think there was a comment earlier about NAD plus. So the belief is that if you increase your NAD levels, that is a precursor to NADH, and NADH feeds into complex 1 of the electron transport chain inside your mitochondria, which creates ATP and gives you more energy, and that might be the currency of life in some way. But people are getting like other, things inside their IV bags too that maybe help them, glutathione, various vitamins, other supplements. But all this stuff is happening, and who knows, maybe it's good, maybe it's not so great, but it is definitely happening for people that are really trying to take a proactive approach to their own health. And finally, just some quickly emerging things that we're seeing, like we're saying this explosion in new health technology, plus the occasional goofy or wacky idea. I think I said this before, I wear a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. It basically tracks my blood glucose every 15 seconds throughout the day. So when I eat something, I could see a big jump, sometimes, and I could see just a much smaller spike other times. So when I had the dumplings in Chinatown, my blood sugar spiked like crazy. When I had the slice of pizza, not nearly as bad. I think the reason this is important, not just specifically with CGMs, is that as these devices, become much more prevalent, and just last week, we saw the FDA approve the first over-the-counter continuous glucose monitor. Right? Previously, you needed a doctor's prescription to get one. This summer, you're going to be able to just go into like a Walgreens and buy one over the counter without a prescription. It shortens the gap between people taking a certain behavior and getting a certain result. Like if I eat like a burger, like maybe it affects me 6 months down the road. Like you don't really see the immediate impact of what you eat so much on your health. But if I eat something and 5 seconds later or 5 minutes later, I see it impacting my blood sugar or my blood pressure or something else, that shortening of that gap is what's going to drive more conscientious behavior, I think, right? Because you're going to see the cause and effect that you weren't able to see in the past. So I think as we have more wearables come to market, here's the Samsung Ring, which I think is going to be like a, launch with a lot of fanfare, probably in the third quarter of this year. You have the Oura Ring already. Samsung's going to sort of go big with theirs and probably have a larger market because they have such a big installed base with their phones and stuff already. That's going to measure a bunch of stuff in your body. You're going to have a lot more people not just tracking their health, but seeing the connection between what they put in their mouth and what it does to their health in real time. And as more and more of that starts to happen, more people are going to start really thinking about what they're going to put in their mouth. Marie, you found this too, this product, Munch. What is this?
Yeah, so we saw sugars, the number one thing people are looking to avoid in our diet. So this is a product, I think it just comes available in May or sometime really recently. It's by a startup called BioLumen, and it's a fiber-based drink that turns into a sponge in our gut and purportedly absorbs all the sugar we've recently ingested. So perhaps there's this article in The Guardian, can we have our cake and eat it too? We'll see.
Yeah. What is this product over here?
This is colostrum. So colostrum is the first milk produced by mammals right after giving birth, and it's chock full of nutrition. It's, you know, designed for infants to get them everything they need when they're seconds old or minutes old or days old. I think it is produced 48 to 72 hours after birth. And now it's become quite a popular food additive, actually, bovine colostrum, for immunity benefits, for our skin health, for more energy, for better performance in a lot of ways. So kind of like collagen, I would say.
Yeah.
Different product, but we're also seeing it as a skin topical.
That is awesome. And this one I'm not so sure about.
So we talked just a bit about sleep. I think someone mentioned it's National Sleep Day tomorrow. So this reminds me of functional foods. You know, we look for our foods to do something more for us. This is kind of like looking for our sleep to do something more for us. You put this tape on your mouth, it encourages nose breathing versus mouth breathing. And you can see the benefits. It defines our jaw lines. It gives us brighter eyes. We wake up with more energy. There's tons of types of this on Amazon. Certainly there's clear versions. They don't all look pink like this, but this is a version that recently was released by a wellness influencer and sold out in like 4 minutes. So
this looks so stupid. I mean, just the way it looks so incredibly dumb. Maybe it works. I don't know. Just the aesthetic of it, I'm not so sure about. Anyways, Marie, Jared, thank you. Just a quick reminder for everyone. We talked before that we have a Data Central 500 report that comes out every year. It is our comprehensive look at all the top chains. Right now, if you are from one of those top 500 chains, we're actually submitting, collecting input to go into this year's report. And if you want to provide a little bit of input, you'll get a free copy of this year's report too. So go to that link you see in the upper right-hand corner if you are a chain operator, datacentral.com/500 survey. Maybe someone in chat can put that link in chat too, so it's easy for people to click on. datacentral.com/500 survey to participate in that survey. If you are a top 500 chain operator, it is going to be a fantastic report. And finally, next month, April 11th, we have our Summer Trends episode. Same time, it is the second Thursday of each month, April 11th, noon Central, everything to prepare for the summer. And I guess Marie, Jared, if you both could stick with me for a couple of minutes as we wind down here. Thank you all. I know we talked about a number of things that may be a little more controversial or whatnot today, or that not everyone agrees with, but that is the whole point of having these conversations and why your chat is so incredibly important. Thanks, everybody.